our churches are critical staples of our community, and they can provide direct services and they can fill in the gap. But that does not negate what we do at the legislative, in the legislative branches around expanding, making the decision to expand Medicaid, right? That does not negate the government's responsibility in assessing and wanting to close the widening racial health care gap, right? It also does not negate their responsibility to public education and ensuring that allocation of funding is there in the right place.
Alrighty, welcome back. We are happy as always. We've had Mayor Stephen Reed on, and now we've got Tafeni English-Relf back with us. This is like an old timers day at the on the podcast. It's
You always
like some of
gotta
our
circle back
favorites.
to the old timers now. You always got to circle back to us.
It's like our favorite guest. It's like the best
That's right.
of
That's right.
kind of series that we've got going here. But how are you, Tafeni?
I am doing well. How about y'all?
Good. Yeah,
We're
not too
good.
bad.
Yeah,
Not too
we're
bad.
good.
It's we're rolling along here on this podcast, and we always appreciate the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for what y'all do with us and having folks on. And I know y'all have a lobbying day coming up. What? I don't know that everybody fully understands what that means. What is a lobbying day?
Yeah, so lobby days are typically set aside to actually demonstrate a collective effort, collective movement, so that community members, Alabamians, will have an opportunity to convene with legislatures. We have community leaders, advocates, and then directly impacted Alabamians around particular issues. And the one that we have up is the Affordable Alabama Advocacy Day.
Oh. Nice. So is that so? What I know affordability has been a big topic among a lot of Alabamians and a lot of Americans. Period. And I know that some of our Democratic colleagues and whatnot over in the state legislature have really focused on that over the course of the first few weeks of the legislative session. What are y'all specifically looking at in terms of affordability?
So we're specifically for this Affordable Alabama Advocacy Day, we do want to uplift issues around the rising cost of utilities, childcare. We also want to talk about the impact of HR 1, particularly specifically the food security, healthcare, and then we will talk about some environmental issues, primarily around the water infrastructure and housing. And in addition, we are our economic justice litigation team will be joining us to talk about their continued advocacy around the criminalization around these garbage fees. And so we hope to bring more awareness around that issue, what our legal advocacy team is doing in that area. And we'll also hear from folks who've experienced that, who've been who've been threatened with jail time. And we'll talk about some recent efforts with our policy director and our economic justice team on that front.
Right. Yeah. We had Micah on last week, and we talked about some of the problems with the garbage situation, and I think y'all have got a lot of good work going on there. But it is there are just so many issues now in relations to affordability that I mean, I guess this is right in y'all's wheelhouse, in the Southern Poverty Law Center, but there seems to be just a plethora of things to tackle now.
It definitely is. And under our umbrella of poverty eradication, we oftentimes talk about that in the context of affordability, whether that's affordable housing or access to housing. But in addition to that, we really need to think about federal and state laws around the affordability issue. And I think oftentimes we think about food insecurity, but as we continue to look at the widening healthcare gap, and specifically around a number of things that have happened federally that are impacting us on the ground, where people will actually lose healthcare coverage and not have that And then the increased cost of that and what it's taking out of people's ability to, just afford those basic needs, whether that's your water bill, your utility bill, um, rent, mortgages, and things of that nature. All of those things, we have to look at local legislation, and then particularly around the budgetary process with that,
Mhm.
right? And where can we have some reprieve, specifically around food insecurity in the local in our general budget.
Stephanie, I am really shocked at how unresponsive, uh, our state leaders seem to be when it comes to these basic questions, especially things that are affecting, people at the grassroots level, in every community. I mean, the cost of healthcare, the cost of food, and some of these other just fundamental things that are having an impact on the on affordability. Why is it that this isn't more? Why do you think it is that this isn't more of a priority for our legislative leaders and even for the governor?
I do think that what we're seeing with the discussion more being around party and not people is one of the things that is contributing to that. I do feel that our legislatures are now beginning to listen to Alabamians. I think that's the part that we don't get to see. Our policy director, along with the number of other organizations who are there, are really bringing home that this budget that Alabama has is a moral budget. It is the people's budget, and they're beginning to see that. Now, I don't know what the response to that will be, but we hope that their response will be in favor to all Alabamians, regardless of what's coming out of the pipeline at the federal level, but that we do look local, right? Because local is where we see so much happening, and I think oftentimes the lack of education around our legislative process and who has the power to do things is also an area that we hope to tackle when we have a number of these advocacy days, which is where we're educating the community on what's in the budget, how your voice can impact the budget, and doing call to actions to their local representatives.
The other thing I wonder about is, and I asked this question during our interview with Mayor Stephen Reed, or at least a variation of this question. How much of this boils down to just fundamental philosophical or ideological differences on what government is supposed to do versus what it's not supposed to do? I know sometimes in the evangelical community, there's a debate about what government shouldn't be doing versus what the church should be doing. I mean, does it come down to that sort of? Do you think that's a dynamic that also impacts what we're talking about here?
I do feel that that's a dynamic, and I will say that it is the responsibility of our local government, right, to ensure that there's adequate funding for education, right, that our children, when they attend schools, are able to focus and concentrate. We have certain governmental guidelines that dictate that, right? And I also think that we also have to remember that there is separation of church and state for a reason, right? And I do think that while our churches are critical staples of our community, and they can provide direct services and they can fill in the gap, but that does not negate what we do at the legislative in the legislative branches around expanding, making the decision to expand Medicaid, right? That does
Mhm.
not negate the government's responsibility in assessing and wanting to close the widening racial health care gap, right? It
Right,
also does
right.
not negate their responsibility to public education and ensuring that allocation of funding is there in the right place. I think it was 2012, 2013, I can't remember, where there was uh, this entity set aside for housing, but the legislature negated to fund
Mhm.
that body of work, which again, why would you have an entity that is to address the housing crisis, which is only a portion, it's not the entirety of it, right? And then, I think I'll also back to just when we think about the civil rights legislation around housing, the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which was passed shortly after the assassination of Dr. King, and part of that is also ensuring people also have the opportunity to build generational wealth with being able to
Yes.
purchase homes and all of that.
Yeah.
So there are so many different nuances that do involve the government and is not the church's responsibility, right?
Mhm.
And that I think when I oftentimes hear that, it almost reminds me of this whole notion of everybody can pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Mhm.
And the question is always posed, well, what if you don't have boots,
Yeah.
Mm.
right? And
Mhm.
so I also think with our campaign around poverty is not a line, like we cannot negate the systems that contribute to poverty and those
Right.
systems that create barriers, right, to economic mobility. And so all of those factors are important. And those discussions should be had with Alabamians, with government, and that's where the conversation when we talk about the government, that is the responsibility of your local elected official. They should be
Yeah,
concerned with the number of data centers that are coming into town and who will incur the burden of those costs, right?
that's right.
um and to say, yeah, or to have the notion that we should just find a way and make one is inexcusable.
Real quickly, I just want to say this and get your response. You know, people forget, and this is why knowing history is so important. People forget that the government back in the early part of the 20th century and probably even and probably even into the previous century, government often protected the rights and opportunities of white citizens through the
Mhm.
GI Bill, through
Mhm.
housing, and through other initiatives. The government specifically protected opportunities for white people while simultaneously disenfranchising through blocking
Mhm.
black people of
Mhm.
opportunities.
Mhm.
So the government
Yeah.
has
That's
always
why we
been
got that whole land grant
interventionist.
college situation going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
government
Mhm.
has always intervened on behalf of white people while at the same time actively, blocking black people from opportunities. So,
Mhm.
this is what you're talking about to me. And of course, what we eventually learned was they weren't just blocking black people, but they were also blocking poor whites and people of
Mhm.
other ethnicities and
Mhm.
women,
Mhm.
and LGBTQ, and we can go on and on. So, what you're talking about and what I'm talking about is simply cor- taking corrective action for
Absolutely.
literally decades of discrimination that have created gaps in prosperity and opportunity.
Absolutely, David. And even to that point, the intentionality behind redlining, as well as, we can look at the Department of Transportation as well, and just the intentionality behind that to segregate and isolate communities. But you also, when we look at those in particular specific neighborhoods, you also took economic viability from those
Mhm.
neighborhoods, right? Adequate grocery stores, pharmacies, medical personnel. And we're seeing that happen in such large scale throughout the state of Alabama. And not, I mean, look at our rural communities. Our rural communities will virtually have no access to health care with the
Right.
number of
Mhm.
rural hospitals closing. And then, at one point there was this effort where physicians were incentivized to go into rural communities to provide medical care. And now that's gone. So, to your point, the government should definitely be working to, one, acknowledge and not erase that part of history, but also to make corrective action where all Alabamians have the opportunity and the ability to thrive. And we can talk about livable wages, right?
Mhm.
And also just the barriers that unions faced in Alabama from decades ago, right? And we're still being haunted by that whole notion of unions protecting people who are laboring
Mhm.
for this state. And so I
Yeah.
think that those are also issues that, we can spin a gamut. We probably need lobby days every single day of the legislature's session
Yeah.
Hmm.
to
Right.
cover the affordable crisis in Alabama.
Mhm. Hey, and you're right about all of that. But before we let you go, I did want
Mhm.
to ask you about the wreath laying ceremony. As to me, it's one of the best events that occurs in the city of Montgomery every year. This year, when is it this year? What do y'all have planned, and kind of just tell people how they
Yeah.
can be a part of that.
So this year on Thursday, March 5th, prior to the official kickoff that evening in Selma, we'll have the wreath laying ceremony at 2 p.m. We do this in honor of late Congressman John Lewis because the memorial was so important to him around educating around the sacrifices of the modern civil rights movement. But this year, in addition to the late Congressman John Lewis, we are going to pay tribute to native Selmian, which is Joanne Bland, who we recently lost, a warrior in the movement, an outspoken um, e- advocate, especially for young people's
Hmm.
involvement in the movement, which is why she created Foot Soldiers Park. So we are going to definitely pay tribute to her. We are expecting Congresswoman Nakima Williams to be with us again this year. She is now serving in Georgia. Our interim chief of staff, Leisha Brooks, will also be speaking, in addition to our interim CEO, Brian Fair, who will also bring greetings. And so, the community, please come out and join us at 2 p.m. at the Civil Rights Memorial Center.
All righty.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Daphne, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that,
Absolutely.
for everything that you do and that the SPLC does.
Yes,
We are so proud to have y'all with us and to
absolutely.
help in any way that we possibly can. We love it. We love what y'all do. We believe in it, and
Yeah.
so
Thank you.
it is y'all do great work, and I hope you continue on. It is. I don't know of a time in my life where the work has been more important than what you're doing right
Hmm.
now
Yeah.
for so many people
Hmm.
around the state, and we want y'all to keep it up. And anything we can do to help in that front, we're happy to do so. So, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you all, especially in this day and time with media. So thank you so much for your continued contributions and highlighting these issues in Alabama and across the country. We appreciate y'all so
Absolutely.
much.
Happy to do
Yeah.
it. Happy to do it.
Happy to
Thank you so
do it.
much. That is
That's right.
Tafeni
Thank you.
English-Relf, the SPLC. Y'all support them, help them out, do anything you can because right now they're helping out your friends and neighbors and making life more affordable and more livable and righting a whole bunch of wrongs that are going on out there. And if they're not doing it, then who is? So, all right,
That's
we're going to
right.
slide out.
Mm.
We'll come back in just a
All right.
minute. Alabama politics this week. Back in a moment.